Yo, it's Lerald, and boy oh boy do we have a build update for you here today. Pathfinder is 100% the most underrated ascendancy in the game right now. Being completely immune to slows is just so deeply underrated. Chilled Ground and Temp Chains are two of the most annoying affixes in the game for 16 of the 17 ascendancies in the game right now. And then for Pathfinder, they literally just don't do anything. They're a straight up free rarity bonus. But also the damage and the clear speed on this build are completely unethical for how cheap it was to get up to Uber Boss Annihilating levels. So we've made some updates to the build over the last few days to add substantially more damage and reduce the amount of time you spend ramping up on bosses, because that was really the biggest problem that we had with the build in the previous iteration. You can pretty much pre-fire everything before a boss is said his final voice line, before dying or whatever, and then you can just start turning them into goo the moment that they activate. I'm also going to talk about how to craft some of the gear that you can use in this build on a relative budget, mainly the bow. That is kind of the biggest, most important piece of gear in the build, and it's pretty easy to get 4 very good deterministically acquired mods on the bow. Then the other 2 mods are a little bit more RNG, but we'll kind of talk about that. I also want to point out, and I want you, the viewer, to appreciate the fact that I went and killed some Uber bosses, some Pinnacle bosses, that I had no reason to kill, that I don't like throwing away currency on, and which dropped absolutely nothing, except for these clips of them dying very quickly. So let's get into it, but first be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and join our Discord as well. We're over 1,300 members and still growing. Alright, so we've had more questions about leveling the build. Again, our first video, this is the third now, the first video on the build really talked mostly about leveling. The only thing I would say that I didn't really mention thus far is just you can kind of rotate through all of the unique bows that are in the game. They kind of provide a nice little progression path for leveling, with the exception of Quill Rain, because it gives you less attack damage, and that's just very bad. The attack speed is not an advantage at all for playing a poison build, and then once you get to Sliver Tongue at level 39, you just lock in on that and you're good to go. You can also use Plague Finger while leveling. This is something you can use, I think, from level 1, and it just lets elemental damage contribute to poison, so you can just stack as much elemental damage as you can from Quiver and Rings and, all that other stuff. And other than that, you get all those skills that you need to level the build, in Act 1, and then you just want to build the tree out from the starting point as though you're going toward the end of the in-game tree. And so on that note, let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that we made to the tree, and I'll obviously link the pop as well, but I'm just going to kind of look at some of them in-game because I think some of them look a little bit easier to digest in-game, and mostly what we've done here is we've changed our From Nothing. Previously we were using a Chaos Inoculation from Nothing that gave pure Chaos and Tempered Mind, and made those very easy to pick up, and so we've dropped that, gone with the much more expensive Walker of the Wilds From Nothing here, and then overlap that with an Against the Darkness. This is really, really good tech. Specifically what we're doing is a 4% damage as extra Chaos damage against the Darkness. The 1% max Lightning Res is not a huge deal, but it's not bad. And then we're taking these nodes here, Stupefy, which we can take the Against the Darkness out for a little bit more readability. Gives you a chance to daze on hit, which does work with your poison attacks. 40% increased damage against dazed enemies, and then also dizzying hits, 10% chance to daze on hit, those stack, and 40% crit chance against dazed enemies. These are just both really good bonuses on their own. 2 of the travel nodes, this one and this one, are also pretty good. And then you can also pick up Material Solidification for 8% of extra damages, or damages extra physical. That's also pretty good. And then Against the Darkness overlaps, not with Material Solidification, but with the others, Stupefy, so now you're getting 40% extra damage and 4% damage to extra chaos, and then dizzying hits, 40% crit chance, and 4% damage to extra chaos. And then you're also getting that over here on Heart Stopping, Struck Through, and Heartbreaking. You also are able to save one of these little travel nodes here because of the Walker of the Wilds allocation. Technically speaking, you could save some points here and just take Enhanced Reflexes and not take any of the rest of these nodes if you want, but I like the defense that you get out of all of this, so I didn't bother doing that. I didn't feel that I needed more damage. So that's kind of the biggest thing. The plan for a while was to come down here and take Cooked. I do have 1 point on the way to Cooked, but you lose a lot of global defense. It's that's kind of a bummer to lose that much defensive value. So maybe you could just do like Throat Seeker. It won't give you as much damage, but it won't be, won't be cutting your energy shield and evasion by quite so much. So right now I've got 2 points into Vile Wounds and 1 point into critical damage bonus, but easily I could just take those 3 and throw them into Throat Seeker instead, and I think that might be like slightly more damage than we get out of the setup that I'm using right now. Most of the rest of the tree is the same. We are kind of going for a lot of move speed. We're taking Step Like Mist. That's a deliberate choice. We're taking Kite Runner, same deal. And I think realistically, the next time that I level up this character, what I'm probably going to do is take all of these points into like damage, crit damage, and Vile Wounds and all that, and just come over here and take Blur for another 4% move speed and a bit more evasion rating as well, just to be even faster. Maybe we go through Eagle Eye to get like more accuracy at range, but realistically, we might do Combat Alchemy because I have switched over to using Null Rot's Resolve on this character for just a little bit more tankiness, and getting more shielding out of that would be good. This character hasn't died in like 5 or 6 days now. I think that's the last time that I can remember dying. So, anything to make it even more tanky and faster is really like good, right? So that's kind of all that's going on with the tree. It felt like it was in pretty good shape last time around, and still do, but this is like a little extra expensive optimization you can do with the Against the Darkness around the Walker of the Wilds gym slot, and then From Nothing around Walker of the Wilds, kind of give you some extra damage there. Shimmering is a really good option as well. 3% move speed if you have Energy Shield. We almost always have Energy Shield, so that's pretty good. And then you actually get like a bit of tankiness on the way to it. So like this whole wheel with Immaterial giving you a ton of evasion rating if you have Energy Shield, and evasion rating making you regenerate more Energy Shield from your Ghost Dances. Like, this is a pretty nice wheel. A little expensive, but you do get a lot of evasion NES out of the whole deal. Like, if you just allocate the whole thing, that's worth like 12k effective health. That's pretty good for something that also gives you move speed. So also an option, something to consider. Now, in terms of skills, we're still using Poison Burst Arrow, Toxic Growth, Plague Bearer, and Vine Arrow. We are still using all of those. Plague Bearer is still useful in situations where Gas Arrow is not. The one thing that we have really added in here that's like very different is Gas Arrow, and the reason for this, and you don't really need Gas Arrow to be like, it doesn't need to be level 20, like 19 is fine. But the reason that we're using Gas Arrow is you could do this, you could throw down a Gas Arrow, and then you could just fire Toxic Growths into it, and they will explode. Without you having to Toxic Growth, Plague Bearer, Toxic Growth, Plague Bearer, Toxic Growth, Plague Bearer, which was like kind of a satisfying playstyle. The only thing that's like limiting me here, just spamming it in the hideout, is mana, which of course would be leeching in a boss fight. But the difference here is instead of doing like 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, you could throw down one Gas Arrow and then get out about 4 or 5 Toxic Growths in a row, which is just way more DPS. And you can see that in some of the footage of the bosses just getting like orbital striked by these Toxic Growth pods. So because of this, I am not feeling like I need to swap out of the like, this is my clearing Poison Burst setup with Fork and Multi-Shot and Bursting Plague, and into like Rapid Attacks, Overextend, Deliberation, Single Target setup. Like, I still have these socketed here in Bowshot, but basically on bossing, I never use Poison and Burst Arrow at all, really. So it's just Gas Arrow, and then spamming Toxic Growth on the boss, and that's kind of it. And the only thing that's like really tricky or whatever is just remembering to recast Gas Arrow every like, I don't know, third or fourth or fifth Toxic Growth, basically. Or if the boss moves, that can be a little annoying. Sometimes you have to hit Mana Flask. That's kind of it, though. So the supports that we're using on Gas Arrow to make it be like more effective are Multi-Shot, Deadly Poison, because it is a poisoning skill. We want to get it 3 clouds down, get a bunch of poison build up, so it'll instantly pop those Toxic Growth pods. And then we're doing Prolonged Duration, so it lasts longer, and then Encroaching Ground, so it'll get much larger. You can see it's really getting huge, 20% extra area of effect per second, up to a maximum of 100%. You can see the difference, like, this is what it looks like without that. Not very big. And this is what it looks like with that. Give it a couple of seconds here to grow out to full size. Humongous, right? Enormous. And then also Overreach, just because this is 40% increased area of effect, and the downside of it reducing accuracy rating is totally irrelevant because we're only using this to pop Toxic Growth pods. So the reason we're not using Gas Arrow for anything else is, as much as I want Gas Arrow to be good, it kind of is terrible if there's fire damage around. It will blow up the Gas Arrow pools immediately, and because of the way we're scaling the build, that does no damage at all. It's really, really awful. So, like, that aspect of Gas Arrow is bad. The other issue with Gas Arrow is it can't leech. It can't do anything to sustain mana, so, like, it's really brutal to use in any sort of mapping situation. So it's just generally not a great skill. Like, the damage comes out a lot slower than Poison Burst Arrow. There's just a lot of downsides to Gas Arrow. But for bossing, being able to use it to just trigger Toxic Growth over and over again very quickly is insanely good, as you can see. Then the other thing that we've done here is we've tweaked the gems that we're using on Despair. Specifically, we're using Cursed Ground. So before a boss comes out, you know, Zesh is saying, you know, whatever we that are one or whatever, you could throw down the Cursed Ground and a Toxic or Gas Arrow and a Vine Arrow. You could throw down all of those. Despair, Gas Arrow, Vine Arrow, and then as soon as he comes out and says, you know, whatever, time for me to get killed by your Toxic Growth Pods instantly, then you start flying the Toxic Growth Pods in the air, and now he's deader than dead. Other than that, most of the gems on Despair are pretty much the same. Heightened Curse, Magnified Area, Ritualistic Curse, you know, just trying to get it to be, like, larger and longer lasting, a long duration. It is very expensive. You know, that's maybe the one downside of this, so, like, the slightly annoying thing about this. But you leech all the mana back pretty much instantly, so it's not, like, a huge deal, really, that it's expensive. Like, it just really doesn't matter. But you could use an efficiency support, or whatever it's called, the one that reduces the mana cost by quite a bit. That is something you could use instead of, I think, Ritualistic Curse. You know, make it a little bit smaller, but make it, like, not cost whatever it is, 383 mana, good god. Other than that, most of the skill gems, the setup is still the same. I did play around with a couple of things that people suggested, though, and I just want to mention those. Row amount, I just don't love. Obviously, it makes you move faster, and that's good, but it's also dangerous, right? And, like, this is fast enough moving, running, and gunning for me. You know, it also costs a bunch more spirit, and that means either giving up some modifiers on your body armor or your amulet. The only other place you could get spirit, like, really easily would be on an Against the Darkness. You could get, like, damage, it's extra chaos, and spirit. One of those Against the Darkness jewels will cost like 120 to 150 divines, so very good option if you can afford it, but not cheap at all. But, like, yeah, if you had that here, then that would be 50 extra spirit. You could run Roa, that would be an option. It's fast, that's obviously good, but it is dangerous getting knocked off the row or whatever, and like I said before, I haven't died on this character in like 5 or 6 days. I would like to keep it that way, so I actually don't love Roa. I like being able to roll around. The other one would be Herald of Blood. The issue with that is just, like, you can use Herald of Blood and some bleed on hit support, and, like, use that for a bit more clear out of the combination of Herald of Blood and, Contagious Contamination. The issue is that Herald of Blood requires strength, and I feel like the clear on this build is good already, so it just didn't really, like, seem necessary. I did play around with a couple of other things instead of Plague Bearer, just to kind of fit in that last, that last aura, but ultimately I feel like Plague Bearer is still kind of useful for when things are like, I don't know, you're just struggling to hit them with a Poison Burst Arrow. It happens sometimes in maps, and, you know, hitting around corners and stuff, and I didn't really feel like there was anything I could use that felt better than Plague Bearer at this point, as that third aura. Also, whenever there's fire on the ground and you can't use Gas Arrow to trigger your Toxic Growth, Plague Bearer is still much, much, much better than Poison Burst Arrow. So I like to keep that around. I think that still works really well. All right, now let's talk a little bit about gear. So a lot of the gear is still the same. Rizlatha's Coil is still very good. We've gotten some questions about this. You know, it has the 2 modifiers, less minimum physical attack damage, which means that the low end of your physical attacks is lower. So you want that number to be as small as possible, like 30% is the minimum roll, 30% is the best roll, 31 is what I have on this belt. That's pretty good. More maximum physical attack damage is the opposite. You want that number to be as high as possible, so 40% on that one is also good. You could use a Headhunter as well. I played around with Headhunter. It's obviously good. We've been running a lot of Ritual recently, though, and Ritual and Headhunter kind of don't work that well together. Headhunter is really a lot better for, like, zooming through maps or running breaches, and yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't really feel like it's necessary or anything like that. Obviously, you could add it in and basically double the cost of the build. Not a bad thing, though. I mean, it's fun to have. A lot of these other gear pieces that we have on are just, like very tanky pieces of gear. We've dropped the life out of a lot of pieces of gear just to get more evasion and energy shield, and it shows up in the energy shield value that we have. Body armor, boots, these are very basic. These are very tanky gear slots. You can get a lot of defensive value in your rings, and your body armor, and your boots, and then you're kind of getting a lot of offense in your belt, you're getting a lot of offense in your quiver, obviously in your weapon, and especially in your gloves. Gloves are a spot that you can get a lot of offensive value, and a lot of this comes from Essence of Horror, which is not cheap at all. Let's take a look at what the price on them is up to now, but last I checked it was like 5 divines. Yeah, so what this does is it makes it so that the effect of socketed items in your gloves or boots is 100% increased, and the way, it's an essence, right? So you use it on an item, it'll remove a mod and add that 100% effect of socketed items. So you can kind of try and craft up gloves. There aren't like a ton of great ways to deterministically craft up gloves, so ultimately what we did with these was we just got a pair of gloves that had like some okay rolls on them. Fizz damage, evasion, crit damage bonus, rarity in this case, whatever, and then just slapped a and like one bad mod basically, and also 2 sockets. That's important. And that's not something you can add. You just have to find a pair of gloves that have 2 sockets on them. So these are not going to be cheap, even if the rolls aren't great. Then you slap an Essence of Horror and kind of hope it hits the bad mod basically, and that's what happened with these gloves. I think these were actually ones that I bought from somebody else that they felt like weren't that great because the fizz damage to attacks roll on them isn't that amazing. But I crafted like several other pairs of gloves that had like better mods for other builds, like attack speed, which is useless for this build, no crit damage bonus, like life or more defensive stats, and sold those off for more than these cost to buy ultimately. But yeah, that is just a really good mod because of the Courtesan Manan's Rune of Cruelty, the 15% increased magnitude of damaging ailments you inflict. 2 of those becomes 60% thanks to that Essence of Horror mod, and there you go, you're just getting an enormous amount of damage out of gloves. So the other big piece of gear that's like pretty easy to craft and like get set up correctly is a bow, and I'm gonna go ahead and kind of talk about how to craft that up now. Alright, so let's talk about the base that you want to start with first. So you really have 2 options. You can start with either a Gemini bow. This will give you a bit better clear. It won't hit as hard as a Warmonger bow, but it will give you more clear because of the extra arrow that it fires. Alternately, you can go with a Warmonger bow. That's what I've done because it gives you better single target damage. I think that's really the best. You can do an Obliterator bow, but reduced projectile range means that your arrows won't fly as far, so your clear is actually going to be worse. Much better single target, as you can see, like very, very hard-hitting bow, very high flat fizz damage roll, 65 to 115, as opposed to 56 to 84. But like I said, Warmonger bow I think is kind of the best of both worlds. Good clear because of no reduced projectile range, and then also good single target damage because it's not getting penalized for having the extra projectile like Gemini bows are. So what you want to do is you want to look up a Warmonger bow, or again, make your choice of which one. You want to look up a magic one that has increased physical damage, and depending on your budget, you could go anywhere for like a T2, which is like 160 to 160, or 155 to 169. Or you can go for a tier 1 if you really want to be a big spender, but this is going to put you in the like 20 divine range. But yeah, like 170 plus. So just for an example craft here, we can just go with like a cheaper one. We'll go with like, yeah, 164. That works. So this will cost a couple of annuls. We'll buy this and we'll actually just craft this up and kind of walk through how it goes. Alright, so we have this % increased fizz damage bow with no suffix. I'm just going to go ahead and slap an AUG onto it. Just, try and get something good, and when we use a perfect AUG. This why not? Okay, terrible suffix, that's actually good. Okay, so from this point, what we want to do as our first step is slap a greater essence of abrasion on it. That will give us % fizz and flat fizz as 2 prefixes. This is great. Then our third step in like locking down our prefixes is just simply to grab a ritual omen of, do I have them? Yeah, dextral crystallization. This will guarantee that we remove a suffix, and we're going to remove that terrible accuracy mod. And then we'll add on this prefix of damages extra fizz. Okay, so we have a triple prefix weapon now, % increased fizz, flat increased fizz, and damages extra fizz. That's perfect. We're all set on that front. Now what we can do is just throw a random exalt in for just any mod, because we're going to use another... Alright, perfect. Another bad mod here. That's good. What we're looking for is to add in this mod right here, Perfect Essence of Battle. And we're just going to use another dextral crystallization to do that. So we turn that on. That's why we had to exalt on that crappy dex. We use the Perfect Essence of Battle. Always make sure that your omens are turned on before you go crafting so you don't brick your item. And there we go. We have 4 mods. They're all good mods. It's percent increase fizz, flat fizz, damage is extra fizz, and level 4 of attack skills. Okay, so at this point, you can optionally fracture. You have a 1 in 4 shot of hitting the suffix. If you fracture and you hit the suffix, then you can use, I don't think I have any in here. I don't, but you can use like omens to try and like add and remove or re-roll suffixes. Here we go, like omens of dextral erasure or omens of dextral annulment. Try and like force craft onto the suffixes and like try and hit the perfect suffixes. And what you're really looking for is like crit chance, crit damage. Like those are really good mods to get onto your suffixes. There is another mod that isn't like super useful for DPS, but just for like moving quickly and clearing, and that would be this, the Perfect Essence of Haste mod. You know, that is certainly a thing that you can go for, and you could technically get Perfect Essence of Haste and the Perfect Essence of Battle onto the suffixes just by like filling up the suffixes and then using those, because this is kind of a tip for all essence crafting. If you have like full suffixes, 3 suffixes on a piece of gear, and then you use an essence that adds a suffix, it has to remove a suffix in order to add a suffix. So I am going to go ahead and fracture this. It's not required, but I'm going to go ahead and fracture and just hope I hit the +4 level of attack skills. If I don't, that's okay. I didn't, and that's okay. Alright, so what we'll do here is we're just going to use a preserved jawbone, just kind of keep things cheap. We'll put a fractured mod on the suffix, and then we're also just going to use a homogenizing exaltation. We'll go unveil first and try and get a good mod. We'll use an abyssal echoes as well when we unveil. But the goal here is just to use like a greater exalted orb with a homogenizing exaltation and just hope we add on a good mod at the end. So let's go unveil first, and what we're looking for, again, is like crit chance is good, crit damage bonus is also fine. Mana Leech is something I've gotten on my bow. It's really not that great. You really are better off just getting it on like a ring, but I have gotten it on each of the bows that I've crafted, so it's just kind of, sorted itself out. Alright, yeah, see, this is all bad, so we're definitely going to reroll here and hope that we can get something good, and we don't. That sucks. So what we can do is use Omen of Light to annul off the bad suffix mod and try again, and that is definitely what I will do at some point, but, for the time being, we'll just pull this out of our little guy's hands and use the homogenizing exaltation and a greater exalted orb and hope that we hit crit or, some sort of attack-based mod. We did, we got crit. So now, at this point, we've got 5 really good mods on this bow. The 3 great prefixes that are all extra damage, and then level of attack skills and crit chance. That's really good. Now all we have to do here is just like Omen of Light and then, re-desecrate over and over again until we're able to get a good mod on there, like crit damage or something else like that. So it's not deterministic, obviously, but, we're deterministically able to get like 4 out of 6 good mods and then kind of put our thumb on the scale with the homogenizing exaltation and get crit chance. Like, this is still like a pretty decent bow, and I could slap another Artificer's Orb and like roll it up and just kind of see what this would sell for. Because I don't actually know. I haven't bought any bows on this character since before I got out of maps, so I really don't know. 15 divines, 20 divines, maybe better. I think that's not too bad. All things considered, 20-25 divines, and it was definitely cheaper to craft than it was to go buy one. Assuming that I don't sit and, like, hurt myself trying to do Omen of Light, annulling and re-desecrating over and over again. If I do that, then yeah, this could wind up getting out of hand pretty quickly. But otherwise, pretty easy to make this bow. And, the thing is that, like, this kind of a nice bow like this one is not mandatory for getting this build all the way up to tier 15s. This build was absolutely annihilating tier 15. Not super juicy content, with just like a decently rolled sliver tongue that costs like maybe 1 divine, maybe. You know, you could definitely take a Sliver Tongue all the way up through tier 15s very easily, and it's really only when you want to go after, like, nuking in-game bosses that you need, like, a nice, well-crafted bow like this, that again, really doesn't even cost that much to make. Alright, that's it. That's Poison Pathfinder. This build is great. The addition of Gas Arrow in conjunction with Toxic Growth for really nuking down big pinnacle bosses has just felt super, super good. This is definitely a build like that we would league start. If the league restarted tomorrow, this would be the league starter. Honestly, the worst thing about this build is the idea of like playing other builds afterwards, builds that aren't slow immune, that don't have built-in insane off-screen clear. You know, it's kind of been a spoiler for other builds, which, I mean, as far as bad things to say about a build goes, it's like, that's probably the best bad thing you can really say. Okay, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord and become part of our community. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more PoE content, become a channel member, or come boost our Discord. Thanks for watching. Bye.